welcome to the MEND, a podcast to learn about services and support for victims and survivors of crime, sponsored through the Center for Crime Victim Services here in Vermont. I am Anna Nassett, your host for this bi-monthly podcast and show. And today on the show, I'm delighted to have Selina Boone to talk to us about narcissism and toxic relationships. Welcome, Selina.
Thank you. Thank you.
As many of you know, this show was created to take a deeper look at services, organizations, and concepts for victims and survivors of crime. We want to acknowledge the healing process and provide resources not only in our state of Vermont, but throughout the country and today the world that could benefit victims of crime as they begin to mend. I always want to begin with a trigger warning. Our goal is to create a safe place to discuss topics of healing. But with that in mind, we occasionally hear a story related to crime, discuss our mental health, or have other sensitive subject matter. We urge you to care for yourself and listen at your own discretion. So today on the show, I am delighted to have Selina Boone all the way here from Belgium. Selina and I recently connected via Instagram, of all things, when she made a post about stalking I happened to share. And next thing you know, we were having a conversation, and I'm going to be appearing on her show later today. So I'm so excited to have our first international guest on the show. Selina is a certified relationship coach specialized in toxic relationships. It's her mission to help others break free from toxic ones and create a healthy one in the first place with ourselves. She has written a 5-step program to help with that. Selina is a proud mom of 2 adorable sons. She volunteers for children who live in poverty, and her dream is to one day open a shelter for abused women and men. Her hobbies include writing, running, photography, and traveling. Welcome, Selina.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Anna, for having me. I'm so excited for this podcast, and I'm so grateful that we connected through Instagram, through, a post actually. So it's a small world after all. And thank you very much for having me. I'm feeling super grateful. So thank you.
Well, likewise, I'm so grateful to have you here. And it's just amazing within this work that we do, the connections that we can find in places that we never expected, like Instagram. So I'm in it. I'm all for it.
Exactly.
So as we begin today, would you mind sharing with our listeners just a little bit about yourself and how you came into being a relationship coach? Just kind of whatever you feel like sharing, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I think it's almost 13 or 14 years ago, I ended a highly abusive relationship myself. I was in a high abusive relationship for 7.5 years with a narcissist. At that moment in time, I was super young, and I wasn't aware about narcissism or codependency or all those things. I just knew that the relationship was super wrong and was not feeling super good anymore. There was also domestic violence in very severe form. And by the time I got my oldest son, he was then 6 months, I decided hey, this is not what I signed up for. And this is not how I want to raise my son. And strange enough, I didn't have the strength and the power for myself to leave that relationship. It was when I was already pregnant of my son that I realized hey, something is fishy, something is really off. And in a period of a year, it escalated super, super bad. Then you end up alone. I took all my stuff. I left him from one day on another. I left everything behind, our house, the businesses we had, everything. And I just left with my son, 6 months old. And then the process starts, the process of healing, the process of meeting yourself. I lived alone with him. And it was in that moment in time, I went to a police officer as well to map everything, to prepare everything in court, everything. And he talked to me about narcissism. He asked me hey, have you ever heard about the term narcissism? And I was no, I never heard of it before. What is it? And he said, no, I'm not going to dive into it right now. But what I want you to do is after this session, go home, look it up, read books about it. He gave me a list with some tips about narcissism, read those books. And the plan was also to map the 7.5 years of the relationship, which is insane. I mean, 7.5 years, that's huge. So I started writing everything, my experience during the relationship. And I also started reading more and more in books and online. And by every sentence that I read, it was this is me, this is my story, this is just written all over me, that I could recognize everything. At first it was a relief because you think like, oh, I'm not crazy, it's okay. But at the other hand, it was also like, oh, this is what I've been in for 7.5 years. This is what I've been putting myself through. This is what I'm enduring all those time. Anyway, it was a very difficult period in time where my healing started, and I made a decision there, or an engagement with myself, and I decided if I can overcome this together with my son, a 6-month-old baby, starting from scratch with nothing, then I will dedicate the rest of my life helping other people, breaking free from toxic and abusive relationship, and create awareness about narcissism and about domestic violence and everything that goes in, that has to do with it, because we talk about those terms right now like it's nothing, but it has a load on it, So that's what I did. I went to evening school. I started studying. I got my certificate. I studied psychology as well. I went to relationship coaching. I read, I think, so many books about the topic. And I started coaching. First, it was, a few hours here and there, and then more and more. And right now, I'm coaching people also worldwide. I think Belgium, South Africa. I have customers in New York. So a bit of everywhere. And to be honest, I really love what I'm doing. And I'm very grateful. That sounds maybe a bit weird, but I'm very grateful that experience brought me this far, because sometimes people think like, how can you be grateful for that? But somehow I am, because it formed me and it shaped me into the person I am today. And without that experience and without that luggage, I couldn't be doing what I am doing today. So that is, me in a nutshell, let's say.
Amazing. First off, I want to commend that police officer. What an incredible thing that he or she knew to say, like, are you familiar with these terms? Like, that was a really great experience with law enforcement. And I'm really glad you had that, and that set you on this journey. And also just hearing you say you're grateful, I understand that, in doing this work, our work is different, but it's very much in that same vein. People often are like, how do you do this? How are you grateful? How do you love what you do? I'm like, I can't explain it. This isn't where I thought I would be in my life, but I'm so glad I am. And that we can turn what was a really horrible experience into helping others in different ways so that they don't experience the same things we did. There's a lot of gratitude in that.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for our listeners who aren't familiar with the terms of narcissism, codependency, toxic relationship, can you share a little bit about what those terms mean, and just kind of how they sometimes can appear in a relationship?
It's a very broad question. So if it's okay for you, I will start with the toxic part, maybe, because a toxic relationship doesn't really mean that you are in a relationship with a narcissist. I want to make that, that difference, because there are two different things. For me, a toxic relationship is also, you can look at a person or at a relationship and you can find a lot of traits in it and say like, hey, this is toxic. But what for me is also very important, and what I do in coaching, is also reflect to yourself. How am I changing? How am I in this relationship? How am I behaving in this relationship? Because often we only mirror and we only look at the other person, but we don't look at ourselves. So for me, a toxic relationship is when we look at the relationship, is walking on eggshells, not being supported, the feeling of being alone or very lonely in a relationship, also being humiliated from time to time, demeaned, stuff like that. That is for me being in a toxic relationship. When you turn it around and look at yourself, often I see that people are, sometimes they'll say, I'm just a shadow of the person I used to be. I'm isolated from my friends. I'm not going out anymore. I don't see my friends anymore. I don't see my family. I barely speak to them. And I notice when I talk to them that I talk in a different way, that I withhold information, that I don't share everything. A sense of shame. Also not being able to do social activities, but for themselves. Like, hey, before I was a runner, I went out, I run 2-3 times, but my boyfriend, he doesn't like it. All those small patterns, things in yourself start changing, that you are not who you are or not who you are meant to be. Those are, for me, signs that you are in a toxic relationship. It doesn't really have to be an abusive one already, but those are very specific signs that are all in the start phase of a relationship. When we talk about narcissism, that's something totally different. And also therein, I usually make a difference, because nowadays we hear it often. Hey, that person, that's a narcissist, or a person is more selfish or has not that much empathy towards the situation. And he or she instantly gets the label, they're a narcissist. And yeah, sure, people can have narcissistic characteristics that can be, but it doesn't make them a narcissist. That is a very loaded label, and it's a severe diagnosis. And I also tell people, like, hey, you have to be very careful with that diagnosis, because it's not something to take lightly. And I think in the DSM, it's listed in the DSM, the MPD, you have 9 criteria, and you have at least 5 or more criteria that you need to check. And it's going from lack of empathy to a huge sense of entitlement. They have a grandiose feeling about themselves. It's like the universe is evolving around them, everything is evolving around them. They are the best. They also fantasize about their life, but then in a bit of an absurd way, like power-wise, money-wise, love-wise, everything is like grandiose. Everything is super. Everything is great. And that is more the relationship with a narcissist. The not supporting part, the lack of empathy, the evolving around them. They also drain a person just to feel good about themselves. And that is what you are actually in a relationship, some kind of supply, so they can feed themselves and they can uprise. And when you are better in something, they will downsize you, they will criticize you, they will make you feel super small, super little, because they cannot accept the fact that you are better in something else than that they are. So I don't know if it really makes sense how I'm putting it.
No, that was great. I mean, it is a really broad question, and I love the way you broke out both of those components, and also how you acknowledge that people do throw around these terms so often these days, and it's a hefty term to throw around. I really appreciate that you acknowledge that. We see that more and more with different terminology, like triggered people, like I'm triggered over everything, or this person is a narcissist. And so I really appreciate that you acknowledge that and caution people to really research and look up what the criteria is, so that we're not throwing around these words, because when we do, it really diminishes what someone else might be experiencing. So thank you for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So within that, how does toxic and narcissistic people work in relationships, and how does that sometimes lead to domestic violence? I'm not sure if that question makes sense, but what is that trajectory?
I want to stick to the part of a narcissistic phase, if that's okay for you. When we are in a narcissistic relationship, or in a relationship with a narcissist, you have a clear pattern. And the pattern is actually, you have 4 phases. The first is the idealized phase, wherein the narcissist will love bomb you. The sky is the limit. You're in a Hollywood scene. The moment that you pinch yourself in the cheek in the morning, like, how the hell did I get so lucky? Where this Prince Charming or this woman came from? How come they are choosing me? They seem to have it all. The love bombing phase. It's they put you on a pedestal, and they're super good at that. That's also the other side of the medal, because when you break free from a narcissist, the majority of the time, a lot of clients tell me, like, I was never that much in love as with a narcissist, because they're so good in that phase. They're so good in a love bombing. They're so good in making you feel like you're the only person in the universe I want to spend my time in my life with. Then you have the devalue phase. That's the phase where things start changing. They become cold, icier. They withdraw all the love and affection that they showed before. And it's like a huge difference and a huge contrast, because first you were this person, you were their universe, and all of a sudden, all of the interest is gone. And they start little by little also diminishing you and humiliating you. And that's something that people don't get. It is so subtle in the beginning that you are not really aware of it. You are like confused. Is this like good intention speaking? Are they helping me, or are they like really trying to change me or steer me in a direction? It is that subtle that you don't really realize. To give you an example, let's say you wear clothing of a certain brand, but for them it's not suitable enough, so they make a comment like, oh, next time when we go shopping or when we go out, I don't want you to wear that brand anymore. And what do? Oh, I love that. I love my partner. I love my wife. I love him. Next time when we go out, I will not wear that anymore. I will buy that brand that he loves, just to please them, and it starts with that small thing. But it doesn't stop with that, the way you dress. It goes further and further and further, and you constantly doing all sorts of things to be loved, to be seen, to be valued. But that's already too late. Then you have the discourage phase. Is actually the phase when you see the end already coming, and there are all sorts of things that happen in the discourage phase. They can instantly block you on social media, throw you off. They can start talking to family and friends, start a smear campaign. They can also just block you on your phone or stonewall you, give you really the silent treatment. And it goes on and off. So you're really confused, like what is happening? One moment we are sitting here, we having dinner, we talk about the day, and even an hour or 2 hours later, they can just go and give you the silent treatment. Or all of a sudden your parents call and they say like, hey, I heard a story, this or that, what is happening? So that's very confusing, because in that moment you will confront a narcissist and ask like, hey, what is going on? And they just ignore you completely. Then the fourth phase, that's the Hoover Face, which makes the circle round. And the Hoover Phase is actually when they decide that they want to have you back. And then it's a sort of repetition of the love bombing phase, but not entirely. They will do everything in their power to lure you back in that relationship, to keep you, from you to go. They don't want you to go. So they will do everything in their power to make you feel loved, or believe them like, hey, I'm sorry, I was so, I don't know, preoccupied with work, or I was a bit mean, I see this, or I try to change. And they make fake promises. Future faking is also a huge part in the hoovering phase. So you will come back, and then the circle repeats itself over and over and over. So that's a bit the phases in a narcissistic, relationship with a narcissist.
Thank you. So I'm hearing idealize, devalue, discard, Hoover, repeat.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I know, like you and I talked before, that a lot of times within the narcissistic relationship, it might not turn into physical violence, but there is definitely that verbal and emotional violence component. Do you want to speak at all to that? Because I know that like that is so, at least in our culture, it's still very devalued. Like, oh, well, they at least quote unquote, they didn't hit you, is something that we hear. And I'm guessing it's the same in Belgium as well. And just how we can kind of re-educate ourselves to realize that verbal and emotional violence can have just as much impact. So I'm not sure if you want to speak to that at all, or what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, sure. I think it's very important to talk about those things, and I'm very grateful that you mentioned that point. I think, in my opinion, physical and emotional abuse, they are different. But I rather have physical abuse than emotional abuse. And I know what I'm saying right now is probably, for listeners or other people, I think now she lost her mind. Yeah, you can think that I lost my mind, but when somebody will hit me, I will have bruises, or maybe a broken rib or something else that's broken, but it will heal. 12 weeks, maybe longer, but I will heal and the bruise will go. But when we talk about emotional abuse, that are things that those things have such a huge impact that a lot of people underestimate. When we talk about let's say gaslighting, that's something so severe. The damage is so severe. Even years after breaking free from a toxic relationship or from that kind of abuse, people still have trouble believing their own perception of facts, and they will put others' perception higher than that of themselves, because they've been gaslighted over and over and over. Being stonewalled, is getting the silent treatment in a relationship, or constantly the passive aggressive behavior. All those small things, they have a huge impact on a person. And those things, when you are in a relationship for months and years, that's a pattern. That's something that becomes a habit, and you will take it with you. So even in a next relationship, or even in friendships or other things, you will go more to that part, playing your part. You will be more like the people pleaser. You put yourself more to the background, because you're constantly giving like, hey, I have to give in order to be seen. I have to give in order to be someone. I have to give in order to just be a human being. And actually, it's your human right. You don't have to do anything in order to just be, you know what I mean? And the impact of emotional abuse for me is way much stronger and harder than physical abuse will ever have. And I think it's a shame. I understand also when we talk about court and justice, and when we go to through all those things, it's very complicated to prove those things. It's very complicated to go to a police station and say like, hey, I'm being emotional abused. Okay, yeah, tell me all about it. But what can they do, you know? But when you come there and you're like bruised everywhere, and you have a doctor's file saying, yeah, this, and that, that's something justice can work with. And that's something that's so unfortunate, because what do you do with victims of emotional abuse? How do you help them? How do you give them also a sense of being seen and being heard, which is also very important in the healing journey. So that's a very tough one. And here in Europe, I think it's similar to the States. That's something I really think we can improve a lot, or we have to improve a lot, or at least that's my opinion.
Absolutely. And just, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. And I mean, that was one of the things we connected on, was, you know, me with the crime of stalking, where it's still that invisible thing. And people are like, it's all emotional. It's all psychological. And I think, we culturally have to keep educating ourselves. And one of the things that we talked about was this program on Netflix that just came out called MAID, M-A-I-D, for listeners who haven't, and it's a really clear depiction of emotional abuse. I think it's so well done. So for folks who want to learn more and be able to see that, how that story unfolds, I think it's a really good example. So, oh gosh, I have so many questions. Okay, so I'll try and stay on track. Yeah, okay, I've got my train of thought back. How do we look for signs of these things in our relationships? And what do you advise to someone who is in either a toxic or narcissistic relationship in order to create an exit strategy? So signs that we're in it, and how do we exit?
The signs is, like I said in the beginning, make them separate. Look at yourself, look at the person you are in the relationship, before the relationship and in the relationship. See how you are changing. If there's a huge shift in that, if, like, let's say all the things that the examples we gave before, if you were a runner, you went out 3 times a week, you saw your friends on a daily basis, or you called, or you saw your parents every weekend, and all those things are narrowed down, and you are in a relationship constantly and investing in a relationship constantly, for me, that's a huge sign. Ask yourself the question, how come that I am not able to be the person that I was before in this relationship? Because in my opinion, when you are in a relationship, you have 3 lives. You have your life, the life of your partner, and you have an us life. But it's very normal that all the things that you did before, that you can also do them in a relationship. It doesn't mean that having a relationship is the end of your social life or the end of you as a person. And that is, for me, a huge sign. Other things, when we speak about narcissism, those red flags, they are already there. And often, very often, that's also what I hear from a lot of people, clients and people that I coach. And that's also something I recognize. Those red flags were there in the beginning, and your gut feeling was already warning you, but you made it look prettier, or you said, no, it's not this, or it's not that, and you gave a logical explanation to it, you know. And then I'm talking about, let's say, when you start dating a narcissist, What are clear red flags? They're only talking about themselves. They barely show interest in you. When you talk about special things that are going on in your life, let's say work or friends or whatever, they don't remember, they forget. They show up late when you go out to eat. The way they treat, let's say, a waiter or stuff, how they can be diminishing to them. All those small things add up. The way they talk about previous relationships, the way they talk about exes. Oh, my ex, she was totally crazy. She was totally obsessed by me. Stuff like that. Those are things that are really signs. And I'm not talking about you go out with somebody and he just mentioned, oh, my ex was crazy, but for the rest, he's a cool guy. Then he's not a narcissist. You know what I mean? But if there are a lot of red flags over and over and over, then ask yourself the question, what am I doing? What is also a huge sign of a toxic relationship is that everything goes super fast. You meet a person and 2 weeks later, they moved in together. You know what I mean? And that's also a sign like, whoa, hold your horses, take your time, get to know each other. You don't need to rush into things. And often the love bombing phase, like I said, everything is possible. They check in constantly with you. They text the whole day through 24/7, constantly check in. What are you doing? How are you doing? It's like you cannot breathe. It's like from the moment you meet them, all of a sudden they're 24/7 in your life and you cannot find a moment to breathe. And in the beginning, you think like, wow, this is charming. You know, this person is really into me. Wow, look at, he's texting me. Oh, look how sweet. Look how romantic. And you don't think further. But actually, sometimes you also feel like, here he is again. And if you don't reply within 10, 15 minutes, it's a huge problem. Hey, you didn't reply to me yet. Or they start calling. Where are you? Is everything okay? I was worried you didn't reply. And you think, oh, this is kind of romantic, but it's not, you know? Those are, for me, huge signs of a toxic or a narcissistic relationship. Then the second part of the question was more like what to do. Or exit, like you talk about a narcissistic relationship or then more an abusive relationship, or
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of, you know, if you're in a position where you're like, oh, I know I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, or I'm in this really toxic relationship, but specifically with the narcissism, what would you advise to somebody to be able to exit that relationship safely, even if whether there's violence or not, just to be able to kind of create that exit strategy, knowing that they're probably going to try and come back and do that future faking and Hoover, and like, so we know that that person's going to repeat that cycle. So how would you advise someone to be able to separate from that?
If there are no strings, if there's nothing that is attaching you to the narcissist, I would just cut them off and block them on every platform possible, so they don't get a chance to get back in your life, because they will try to find you. They will try to hoover you back into that relationship. So let's say you're dating for 2-3 weeks, then it's easier. The attachment is not really there. There are no children involved, not a house, not a marriage, not whatsoever. You're not living together. Then just break free, just cut it off. You can even say it like, here's it ends for me, and delete the number, block the number, delete Instagram, whatever. Don't be surprised if afterwards fake accounts come back and back and back. Make your accounts private, whatever, so they cannot see. That's what I would do. But when you are living together, or when you're married, when children are at stake, that is something that makes things more complicated, because often that's also what I hear or see a lot on social media. You have to go no contact. Yeah, cool. You have to go no contact. I fully agree. But what do you do when you are married and you have to arrange things? What do you do when there are children and you have to co-parent with a narcissist? You cannot just say, okay, I'm going to go no contact, and right now I block everything and I don't want to communicate with you anymore. That's not working. So what I would do, depending on how bad and in what phase of the relationship you are, preparation is key. I mean, I don't know, financially also, living with a narcissist, they want to control, they want to have power. So chances are that financially they will also have all the power or all the control about the finance. See that you can start saving for your own, that you can put things aside so you can at least have an amount to start a second life with, because let's face it, without money, it's very difficult. or find a place where you can stay. Talk also with other people. Keep on talking with friends, with family, somebody you can really trust, so you don't feel isolated, so you don't start downing your own sanity, but also to have a support when you finally leave, that you have people around you who are there for you, who can talk with you, that you can lean on, that can also help you with children. If you are really in a violent situation, then also inform and go to shelters, go off the radar for a while, that they cannot find you. Also with the children, go off the radar so you are safe, so you can breathe, and so you can start your life again. And when you are really out of that situation, don't inform them. Let's say you go for work, take all your stuff and just leave. You can maybe call them after and say, hey, I left, but never say those things in advance. The moment you give them a heads up, like, hey, tomorrow I'm going to leave, by the way, here's my suitcase. No, then you create a circle. You have to be always 1 or 2 steps ahead. So that are things that I really recommend. And then afterwards, when you are out of the situation and you cannot go no contact, be aware of the tactics, be aware of the red flags. Know that they will do anything in their power to get you back. It is not that they all of a sudden realize, like, oh, I lost the love of my life, now I'm going to go full Monty and I'm going to get them back and I'm going to shower them with love and all those things. It might seem that way, but it's just the circle repeating itself over and over. When you communicate with a narcissist after, be short, be brief, be very factual. Don't go in emotions. Don't try to explain yourself, because it's only provoking and it will only trigger more and more and more. Also with the children, be very factual. That time you can pick them up, till that time, this is what we're going to do. Be very short, be very factual, and document everything. That's also maybe very crazy what I'm saying, but maybe you will never need it. True, then you use it to lit the fire or make a campfire or whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter, but better safe to sorry. Just document everything. So yeah, those are things that are very important when you want to leave a narcissistic relationship.
Thank you. This was so helpful. And I know so many people are going to gain a lot of wisdom from this. And yes, document everything. Screenshots. It's so easy to screenshot it, throw it in a file on your computer, whatever it is, like, have a little file in your emails, whatever it might be. Just document everything. You don't have to look at it. Hopefully you'll never need it, but you never know. I mean, that's what I tell that's what I tell to anybody who's going through stalking as well, is document.
Yeah, it's so important. Important.
So as we start to wind down, we've got about 10 minutes left.
Wow.
I know, time flies. So, one of the things that you and I were talking about is how we start to break our own patterns. Those patterns of, especially if you've gone through gender-based violence at a young age, when, as a child, as a teenager, whenever it is, how we then get into these patterns of being in relationships with either toxic relationships, narcissistic relationships, violent relationships. And I know that's a lot of the work you do. I know you have a 5-step program. I'm not going to ask you to tell me those, because that's your private work and we are going to promote your work. But just kind of, what are some of your thoughts around how we can look inward and start to break those patterns so that we can have successful relationships?
I love that question, because I often get a lot of questions of people like, do you want to confirm that he's a narcissist, or do you want to explain to me what narcissism is? And yeah, I want to create awareness, and I want to explain to you also what narcissism is. But when you come to me and you ask me like, hey, can you coach me? I will also hold a mirror in front of you, because there's always a dynamic between every couple in every relationship, whether it's a friendship, co-workers, whatever, romantic relationships. The narcissist needs somebody to feed him, and you are giving him that. You are the source of the relationship. You are feeding him. And that sounds very hard. The first time somebody said it to me, like so many years ago, I had something like, what the hell? You don't know what I just went through, and you come and tell me here, this is my responsibility. Who the hell do you think you are, And
Absolutely.
I was very mad at that person, because I had something like the audacity, I was so mad. But in the end, it is true. We are also responsible for the dynamic, and asking yourself the question in your healing journey as well, like, why did I endure that? Why did I go through all those things? And the most important thing is what I mentioned before, is where does this pattern come from that I have to perform in order to be loved? And that is the main thing, because you think you have to perform to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, and that is coming somewhere from your childhood. Probably you've been raised in a dysfunctional family, or you had parents who were emotionally unavailable or abusive, or all, yeah, that's all possible, and you take that pattern with you. If you really want to heal and not go back in the same loop over and over, you also have to be willing to look at your own part. What part am I playing in this relationship? What is the role that I am playing? Because you can look at narcissism, you can educate yourself, you can read every book there is, but if you are not willing to look at yourself and take a look at, hey, why am I going through that? Why am I enduring that? Why is it so difficult for me to put a boundary and say, hey, here is the line and not further? All those things are very important. And the majority of the time, they are linked to your childhood because you were taught a certain way. What is also something is like red flags. A lot of clients that I coach, they find it very difficult to recognize red flags because nobody in their childhood ever taught them, hey, this is a red flag. And that is also the post that connected us. Clients often tell me, yeah, they put a tracker under my car to see where I was at and all those things, or he was stalking me. That's kind of romantic. And then I think, no, that is not a romantic gesture, not at all. That is a huge, huge red flag. Run, and then you dive into that. And for you and me, it's like common sense. We already see like, no, this is totally off. Go, run, now you still can. But it's also recognizing those red flags. And it's also because people didn't learn at a young age to put boundaries, to protect themselves, to be able to express themselves. And that is very important, to go and look at those things and learn about, hey, this is a boundary, this is a red flag, this is a non-negotiable for me in a relationship, and all those things, and really put that framework. A lot of things that I also do in my coaching is asking them, how would your ideal relationship look like? You can choose what kind of relationship you want to be in. How does it look? How does that person need to look? What kind of role are you playing in that relationship? Who do you want to be? And I discovered that that's for a lot of people very difficult because they've never been asked those questions. And that's actually kind of sad if you think about it. People 30, 35, 40, 50 sometimes never thought about that question or never heard about, hey, it's okay or it's healthy to put a boundary. And that's a lot of work we also do together, and very important in the healing journey.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that being able to take a look back through our whole lives and untangling those pivotal moments, whether it be how we were raised or, sexual abuse as a child, whatever that might be. And here in the States, we call it the ACEs, but it's looking at those adverse childhood experiences and untangling that and going, oh, okay, so I've been carrying that my entire life. Yeah. And that's how that shows up in these relationships and friendships and interactions with coworkers, exactly. All of these things. It's, we're talking interpersonal relationships, but it affects everything and exactly. How we can start to break through with that.
Exactly. It's a red line throughout of your life. And when you go back, you can really connect the dots and you can see, as you say, it's not only in a romantic relationship, because that's also what people think often. Oh, it's only in my romantic relationships. No, when you go and take a closer look to friendships, co-workers, whatever, family members, even sometimes you will see the same pattern, only less intense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So my last question as we wind down was, I love this quote that you had on your website. The longest relationship in your life is the one with yourself. So invest in learning how to love yourself. How do we begin? I love that so much. How do we begin to practice? How do we begin to practice that?
Oh, wow.
What does that mean to you?
For me,
or how do you begin to practice that?
For me, it started by slowing down, by really slowing down. And that sounds maybe very, very simple, and it might be very simple, but it's not, because you come out of an abusive relationship and you live a very fast life, and it's a dynamic you are in. But for me, it was also slowing down and asking myself, like, who am I, and who do I want to be? Especially coming out of that relationship, I lost myself entirely. I didn't know who I was. I remember going to the supermarket, doing groceries for myself, and I didn't know what to buy for myself. I didn't know what I love to eat, because I was so used in buying things that he loved. You know what I mean? And this sounds very crazy, I know. But it starts by slowing down and really asking yourself, who am I and what do I like? And make a list for yourself. I started by making a huge mind map and start writing everything down that I liked or that I loved. And, every day it was on my fridge, and every day some new things came along. And then I start realizing, okay, these things I like, but it's not a must-have. Those things are a must-have. This is a non-negotiable. And I start experimenting with a lot of things, like take classes, take workshops, do stuff, and just trying to find out who I am. And the moment you map kind of who you are, what your must-haves are, what your non-negotiables are, how you can then you can easily set boundaries and keep your boundaries. And then you start creating a way to live for yourself. And that for me was a huge changer. And that's also something I do in my coaching with people, is like really become aware, slow down, and become aware of who you are, who you want to be. And it means, like, who do you want to be for yourself, but who do you want to be as a coworker? Who do you want to be as a mother? Who do you want to be as a friend? Who do you want to be as a lover? It is very, very broad, and start living by those things.
I love that. Love that. I moved into the apartment I live in a year and a half ago, and I never thought I could grow plants. But I had one plant, and then my friend gave me like one leaf of a plant, and I started growing that. And now I have over 50 plants in my house.
Oh, I love it. I love it. But
it's a good example of like, of just like
small victories.
What do I love? Okay. Apparently I love houseplants a lot. And, it's just like that. It brings me joy. And I think it's those little things that we can look at and just kind of shift and go, oh, I didn't think I could grow anything. Oh, apparently I can. And that means growing myself as well.
Exactly. And that's such a beautiful example, because also coming from a toxic relationship, you will hear tons of things that you're lousy at, that you're not good at, and all those things. And then the moment you are back on your own, you think, no, I don't have to do that because I'm lousy at it. Somebody told you that years. And then, like you said, then you can grow a plant. And it's like that small victory that brings you closer and closer to yourself. And those moments, they're priceless. They're really priceless.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Selena. I always like to close the show by asking you to just give like a one sentence parting message that's positive for our listeners. Just something that you would love to share.
The majority of the time, I would say the longest relationship, the one you just quoted, is with yourself. Invest in yourself, and however that may be or however that may look, just choose yourself and start by getting to know yourself and living by what you like and what you love. We only live once, so nobody's here to come and do it for you. You're the one doing it. So just
absolutely.
Go. Yeah.
This is our one beautiful, precious life. What are we going to do with it?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Selena, all the way from Belgium. What a joy. If you want to learn more about Selena's work or book a session with her or learn about her 5-step program, you can go to subtlebalance.be. So that is subtlebalance.be to learn more about her work. As always, if you have any questions for me, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me on at standupresources.com. As you know, I'm your host for this bi-weekly show, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Be well, be strong, and goodbye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review or feedback. We love hearing new topic ideas from listeners and watchers as well. Thank you for listening to The MEND, and be well.